Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya 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 Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyarishtane
Okay, who was here last night? You were here. You were here. You were. So we have mostly new people?
Yeah, maybe I'll do a quick intro. Or, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, real quick.
Yeah, real quick. So those of you who weren't here last night, but I do strongly encourage you to go to the YouTube video that's out there on the WhatsApp group, and we shared it today. Please watch. That was part 1 of this series. So tonight we're having part 2. So this is Suresvara Prabhu is a dear disciple and dedicated devotee of ISKCON, dear disciple of Srila Prabhupada, joined in 1970, got initiated first in 1971, second initiation in 1972, recent years, he's dedicated his life to make sure that the devotees around the world, devotees in ISKCON, get a deeper appreciation, understanding, and grasp clear perspective of the importance of Srila Prabhupada, celebrating Srila Prabhupada's unique transcendental position in ISKCON, as well as every follower's foundational relationship with him. Sometimes that can get lost in the mix when you focus on so many other things, and that's also fine, that happens. But when we have devotees like Suresvara Prabhu coming to remind us, it's a real treasure for us. You know, that yes, let us not forget our relationship, but let's enrich it. Let us understand what Srila Prabhupada's vision was or is for ISKCON, ISKCON's growth, and his explanation of guruship, we discovered quite in depth yesterday, and how our relationship with Srila Prabhupada is unique in this institution. So with that,
thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, last time we took a look at it was called The Spiritual Masters, a brief tour of Guru Tattva as Prabhupada and Kaviraj Goswami presented in Sri Chaitanya Chaitamrita, very first chapter, The Spiritual Masters. Tonight we're going to look at a special kind of spiritual master. Like I said, a mega guru, a super guru, a master of masters, someone who is so qualified that this spiritual master takes the whole sampradaya in a dynamic new direction. Like Vishnu Swami and Varka and Ramanuja and Madhva, on that level. Actually, there's never been anyone who did what Prabhupada did, so even among other acharyas, he's unique. Okay, so I have a script here. So what I do is I stick to a script, a sequence, and I also go off it to sort of embellish what I'm saying or add some color to what I'm saying. So it's called the Founder Acharya Principle. Now think about that phrase, founder, English. So it's not, I mean, it's not even 100 years old, this phrase. But the principle goes back centuries. We're taking a look at how this principle evolved in our Sampradaya, Gaudiya Sampradaya. How that principle evolved over since Mahaprabhu came. So it's very interesting how that principle evolved, and the name finally appeared. You know, we say Founder Acharya is right on the plaque, you know, it's everywhere. But we understand really what that means. So although the English-Sanskrit compound Founder Acharya is less than a century old, its seeds in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition date from the time immediately following Lord Chaitanya's departure from this world in what year, according to the Christian calendar, Lord Chaitanya leave? Anybody remember?
1535.
34.
34.
Pretty good. Pretty close. 1486 to 1534, so 48 years. Jesus Christ, 32 years. Shankaracharya, 32 years. It's not how long you live, it's how well you live. How God conscious you are. In this lesson, we'll look at 4 of the seeds of the Founder Acharya principle. Seeds. As well as the great Gaudiya Acharyas who planted those seeds. Okay, so if Mahaprabhu disappeared in 1534, then within 10, 12 years, there was what I call an organizational seed of the Founder Acharya phrase that came up because the 6 Goswamis, within a dozen years after Mahaprabhu disappeared, so we're talking mid-1530s, they started a sangha, they organized a sangha. The Sri Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha. Like we have ISKCON, this is the first manifestation of the Hare Krishna movement. Hare Krishna please, we have chairs, we don't want you stuck in the corner. We want you, get some pads. We have some pads here. Nobody's allowed to hide. I know that's what I do. When I go to seminars, sometimes I sit by the door. In case I don't like it, I just disappear. I think we're like this. Okay, you're hedging your bet, I see, you're near the doorstep. All right, so the 6 Goswamis, those were Mahaprabhu's principal disciples. So, around 1545, Lord Chaitanya's chief disciple, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, founded the Vishva Vaishnav Raj Sabha, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta later identified as the gathering or congregation of devotees who worship, quote, the king of all Vaishnavas in the world, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That was Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of that phrase, Vishva Vaishnav Raj Sabha. As the Sabha's most prolific writer, and philosopher, Srila Jiva Goswami also emerged as the group's most skillful organizer. So this is superhuman. Jiva Goswami, anybody know how many verses he composed?
Like hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, 4 Mahabharats worth of verses, 4 lakh. And he said he wrote them, he didn't change a word. I mean, anybody who writes knows that writing means rewriting. You just gotta, we have a Mahajan here. Mahajan, no, you haven't initiated me.
No.
Not yet.
But I'm having a senior moment on your next Shama. Yeah, okay. Forgive me. Okay.
We got more Mahajans, Mayuri Mahajan, Manita Mahajan. Shamikaji Prabhu's granddaughter.
Oh, okay.
Sarvesh Prabhu's daughter.
Mayuri.
Mayuri.
Mayuri. Hey. Nice to meet you. I said we met, I think, in your house.
That's a Sarvesh's daughter, Sarvesh.
No, I know, but
No, we have not.
no. Well, we'll meet through Prabhupada, right? So, so Jiva Goswami, he not only, I mean, writing means rewriting, but it said he never changed a word. Now, the only other person I ever heard that said about was Shakespeare.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it's true, it might just be a legend. But anyway, Jiva Goswami, Mukta Purush, Manjari Gopi, personal associate of Mahaprabhu. Okay, I can accept that. So, but he not only did that, he founded the Radha Temple. He started a library of all the 6 Goswami's works. And he organized this. He emerged as the organizer of this sabha. Wow, and he was junior, but he wasn't junior. As the Sabha's most prolific writer and philosopher, Srila Jiva Goswami also emerged as the group's most skillful organizer. For example, who's been to the Radha Damodar temple? You been?
Yeah. Vrindavan.
Yeah, and of course we have Prabhupada's rooms there. So we have a special reason to visit there, even more than the deities, we have Prabhupada's rooms. Radha Damodar, where he established a library of all the Goswami's works. He had the foresight to see that what they were writing, Rupa, Sanatan, they were there. This has to be copied and kept, and it wasn't copied like today. They copied it by hand. So it's quite an endeavor. Sri Jiva had those works copied and then dispatched his 3 best students, Srinivas, Narottam, and Shamananda, to Bengal on the first Gaudiya Vaishnava book distribution party, famous story. That party was intercepted by a king who heard from an astrologer there was precious treasure these Goswamis were carrying. And of course the treasure was the works of the Goswamis. So they had, the king employed some thieves to steal it. And then Srinivas found out who had it. And then he converted them all, the king and all the thieves, to devotees. Yeah. The story of what happened to that party, how the books were stolen by a king's thieves, how they were recovered, and how the king and his accomplices later surrendered to Krishna, foreshadowed dramas Lord Chaitanya continues to enact through ISKCON and other Gaudiya groups today. So this whole Sankirtan enterprise is often conducted under, dramatic conditions where the devotees are trying to distribute books and the local authorities don't want that necessarily, and sometimes devotees are chased. And, this is part of the drama of being in Mahaprabhu's movement. Suffice it to say that the Goswamis Sabha, dedicated to articulating, preserving, and distributing the Lord's teachings, planted the founder Acharya principles organizational seed. So founder is an organizational word. Somebody who founds a corporation or anything, he was the first one to organize it and do it. So that's the first seed. So that's circa, mid-1540s. And then just 7 years later, another seed was planted. That's supposed to be a rendering of Srila Rupa Goswami. Around 1552, just a few years after the Sabha's founding, Srila Rupa Goswami finished his landmark work.
Nectar of Youth.
That's Prabhupada.
It's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu.
Right. Prabhupada did a summary study of that. Yes. And I didn't know this, or I'd forgotten it, that when Srila Prabhupada received initiation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in Allahabad, he requested of Acharya Arvinda Das to study Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I didn't know that, or actually I knew something. And so Prabhupada, in the late 60s, after he had founded ISKCON, he was so immersed in the teachings of Rupa Goswami that he actually stopped translating the Bhagavatam. Wow. And he gave us 2 books, 69 and 70, that weren't the Bhagavatam ongoing volumes. Nectar of Devotion, Summary Study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and
Nectar Instruction?
Krishna book.
Oh, Krishna.
Summary Study of the 10th canto. Prabhupada was always saying, I don't know, I'm an old man, I don't know how much longer I can live. You must have these. And you must have the whole, I don't know if I'll get to the 10th canto. He did, but he only got up through chapter 13. So it's a good thing he stopped and did that. So he finished his landmark work. Landmark. It was a historic event in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Prabhupada says means, quote, the ocean of the pure nectar of devotional service. Now in Prabhupada's commentary to the Sri Chaitanya Chaitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 5, text 203, Prabhupada writes, quote, Srila Rupa Goswami is described as the, not founder of Acharya, because there was no English in India yet. Thank God. It was a couple of centuries later. British came in, right? 1700s. So Rupa was described as the Bhakti Rasacharya, or one who knows the essence of devotional service. His famous book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this is Prabhupada's purport, is the science of devotional service. And by reading this book, one can understand the meaning of devotional service. So that's how important it is. Prabhupada also said that about Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Yeah, although he didn't get a chance to translate it, he his dear disciple Gopi Puranadana Prabhu to do that. So essential for devotees did Prabhupada consider Sri Rupa's masterwork that for more than 6 months in 1969, he suspended his Bhagavatam writing to produce a summary study of Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu called The Nectar of Devotion. So, now we're getting to, this is called a philosophical seat. Now you're going to see where the philosophy's going to come in now, of founder Acharya. In his introduction, Prabhupada writes that, quote, in our mental activities, we should always try to think of Krishna and try to plan how to please him. Following in the footsteps, here's the philosophical point. Following in the footsteps of the great Acharyas and the personal spiritual master. Prabhupada's making a distinction between regular gurus and the great Acharyas. And he did it again later in the book. Later in the book, Prabhupada repeats the distinction between, quote, the great Acharyas and the personal spiritual master. By the way, he translates Sri Rupa's phrase, Sadhavartmanavartanam, quote, following in the footsteps of great Acharyas, teachers, under the direction of the spiritual master. So as we saw in lesson 1, there are gurus and there are gurus. Not all gurus are on the same level, and they play different roles. And a founder Acharya is just, far and above all others in his line. Somebody asked me once in a Q&A, you mean Srila Prabhupada's the only, liberated soul, the only Mahabhagavat, the only Shakyavesh avatar, the only Nityasiddha that we're going to see in ISKCON? Why can't there be, why won't others? Does that bar others from coming that are on that level? I said, no, they can come, let them come. We could use a few more of those people. We could use a lot of them because we're struggling to develop ISKCON properly. But if they do show up, what will they do? Will they say, I'm the new avatar, even if they are, you know what they'll do? They'll be very happy to cooperate and follow the founder Acharya. Because the founder Acharya has a singular position. So there are devotees in this movement who are very advanced. You might already be, on some level of Baba or whatever, or Krishna Prema, who knows? But if their qualification, or their a sign of that qualification, is that they're following Srila Prabhupada's directive, as he said, I get to this in the 8th lesson of the seminar. Your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate. They won't just declare themselves some high person and then take their disciples off somewhere else. No, they'll just, because united we stand, divided we fall. Together we can do so many great things. And if we just, in our own little kingdoms, we can't do so much. Okay, so, let's see. Yes. In lesson 1, we learned that initiating and instructing spiritual masters are like parents and relatives, respectively. And I'll repeat what I said last night. If what I'm saying provokes questions in you, then make a mental note or an electronic note or write it down, because we will have a very lively Q&A at the end. Or if I say something completely insane, then raise your hand and say, Prabhu, you said that? Did you mean that? Did you mean something else? No. Check me. It's like they had referee priests and the judges, Vedic days, Hotas, and I forget the names. Yeah, they had people checking the priest to make sure they were pronouncing the mantras right. And they'd stop it. They'd stop the whole jaga if something was off, because then they'd viparitani, they'd get the opposite effect if that mistake was allowed to stand. So, yeah, I give you the power to interrupt me if it gets too crazy. Here we go. Okay. So in lesson 1, we learned that initiating and instructing spiritual masters are like parents and relatives, respectively. Initiators are kind of, it's a parental role, and then the instructors, they do the uncle and auntie kind of role. As a child may at first see his parents and relatives as everything, because the little child is like this child here, you know. Oh, what's the name? Nityalila? Okay, Nityalila. I see by the way you're like Velcro with your mom there. You're sticking to her. That she is everything and all to you, and that's as it should be. But as we grow up, as we mature, then we develop our own individuality. And of course, we're always indebted to our parents. But then we develop our own kind of intelligence, and we have to own the Shastras on our own terms. It's not that we're dependent on everybody our whole life. And of course, we're always dependent on Guru Sadhu Shastra, but we have to mature and grow up ourselves. So as a child may at first see his parents and relatives as everything, and that's proper, then matures to see them in perspective. So a disciple may initially see his spiritual parents and relatives as everything, then matures to appreciate them in relation to, quote, the great Acharyas. Yeah. So that's the job of our Shiksha and Diksha Gurus, is to help us appreciate, in his kind of context, Srila Prabhupada, whose eyes, who provides the lens through which we see all gurus and sadhus and shastras even. Okay. To help us understand this philosophical seed of the founder Acharya principle, that there is a difference between regular gurus and great acharyas, we will now hear how the Acharya Sampradaya culture, the line of prominent Shiksha exemplars, people who practice what the Sampradaya preaches, who make up our disciplic succession, inspired one famous disciple to beg his great guru to bring him closer to their foundational Acharya. So now the next seed is called a cultural seed, and we're going to see this philosophical seed in action. How there is a difference between a regular guru, at least a quantitative difference. Qualitatively, the guru is Sakshat Haritvena, is not different than God. But there is a vast difference in capacity, and also, of course, we're Jiva and God is Vishnu. Okay, so let's go to a cultural seed. Let's see. Okay, this slide was a composite of 3 images that I took from Google Images. And there's, on the left we have Narottam Thakur. The middle is supposed to be Sri Rupa. And it's, yeah, you have that in the background. Who's in the background? You know the pastor.
Srimati Radharani.
Oh, my dear younger brother Sanatan said, where did you get all these nice foodstuffs? I don't know, Miss, you have a beautiful girl, village girl. And then you hear Papa on the tape the way till it's so charming. He goes, oh, you have taken service from Radharani? Oh, this is not yeah. Well, and then on the right, that's supposed to be Narottam's Diksha Guru, initiator, who was
Lokanath.
Lokanath. So you might know the pastime. Okay, so we'll just go to one section of that. This is called a cultural seed. Before the Gaudiya Vaishnava saint Srila Narottam Das Thakur was born, Lord Chaitanya told Lokanath Goswami in a dream, I believe, yeah? Oh, you tell me when I read my quote. Within a short time, this is Lord Chaitanya telling Lokanath Goswami, I believe in a dream. Within a short time, a prince named Narottam will become your disciple. Dream, huh? Yeah. Wow. He will be a gifted devotee, full of love and devotion, and empowered to save the fallen conditioned souls from hellish life. His enchanting, beautiful kirtan will melt even wood or stone. And that was recorded in the Narottam Vilas. After the Lord left this world, however, Sri Lokanath was so distraught, so disturbed, that he withdrew from everyone and vowed never to accept disciples. He couldn't take it when Mahaprabhu left. So he just withdrew. And he took this vow, and people do that. Later in Vrindavan, when Sri Jiva noticed that Narottam was drawn to the saintly Lokanath, so Jiva had three prize pupils, right? Narottam, Shyamananda, and Srinivas. So Narottam was Sri Jiva's student. So a very nice shiksha relationship. And usually the one who gives the most shiksha becomes the diksha. Remember we heard that last night? But Sri Jiva said to Narottam, even though everybody knew that Lokanath wasn't accepting disciples, he said, Narottam, I can see you've given your heart to Lokanath. So you must go and beg him for diksha. You must do that. Even though it was kind of like a non-starter, as we say. So, Sri Jiva told Narottam to approach Lokanath for initiation, but as ardently, you know what that means? Ardent, if somebody does something ardently.
Very intensely and diligently.
Very intensely, devotedly. As ardently as Narottam approached Lokanath, just as adamantly, firmly, Lokanath refused. He's taken a vow. I'm not doing that. Resolved nonetheless, but Narottam was still resolved. Narottam, the son of a king, vowed to become Lokanath's menial servant, and took to cleansing the area where the saint performed his early morning ablutions. Famous story, right? Yeah, so Narottam thought, well, I'm a prince, I'm the son of a king, and Narottam was savvy enough, spiritually savvy enough to know that along with that kind of birth comes a certain pride, privilege, feeling you're better than others because you have a higher material birth. So he knew it would be good for him to knock down that pride, to do something menial for Lokanath. We have some more guests coming. Okay. So, yeah, he resolved to do something very, what do they say, Bungi Chambar, someone who sweeps the toilet room and like that. So he, this is before toilets, this is just the place, where they go, like the tree, and they say, Jai, Hare Krishna, welcome. Please have a seat. Let's get a nice cushion for this Mataji. There you go. We got something for you. Okay. So you can have a chair too, Prabhu. As you like. Okay. So before Narottam knew Lokanath's habits. So he knew what time he would go to evacuate and bathe. So before Lokanath did that, he went to the area and he made sure the earth was nice and smooth and cleansed and fresh water, and vowed to become Lokanath's menial servant, and took to cleansing the area where the saint performed his early morning ablutions. Lokanath was so absorbed in his solitary Krishna meditations that even though he noticed someone was cleansing his ablution area, he paid it little mind. He just was absorbed in his own Nirjan Bhajan. But one day, after an entire year had passed, this went on for a year, and Lokanath is a renunciate, he's a monk, he's a sannyasi. So then it occurred to him, one day after an entire year had passed, he decided to find out who was so conscientiously cleaning up after him. Wow. So the next morning, he came earlier than usual. So he decided to come really early, earlier than Narottam was expecting, to spy. He was hiding behind a tree. Hey, curtains are going to close? Jai Srimati Sri So Lokanath is determined to see who's doing this, and this has got to stop. I can't accept this service. I'm supposed to be renunciate. And so he hid behind a tree. He decided to find out who was so conscientiously cleaning up after him. The next morning he came earlier than usual and hid behind a tree. When Narottam approached, Lokanath saw who it was. Narottam, it's you! He'd already told Narottam, you're not my disciple. Forget it. Find somebody else. His identity exposed, Narottam fell at the saint's feet and begged to be accepted as his disciple. Lokanath refused at first. He tried to keep that vow. Then later relented, remembering Mahaprabhu's prediction, and conquered by the pure devotion of saintly Narottam. So Narottam became Lokanath's, as we say, only child, only disciple. Anybody is anybody an only child here? Does anybody have only one child? You're an only child. Okay. So it's very thick usually, the bond between children and parents when they're the only one. Like my daughter's the only child. So when you have many children, then you have to divide your attention between many, and so it gets a little slacker. But when it's only one, is that true? Am I saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Although Srila Narottam Das Thakur became the only initiated disciple of Srila Lokanath Goswami, in Song 17, verse 4 of Narottam's famous song collection, Prarthana, we sing Prarthana songs every day. Sri Guru Charan Padma is a Prarthana song. In Mayapur every day they sing Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, that's Prarthana. When someone disappears, Ye Anilo Premamadhan, that's Prarthana. So, in the 17th song of this collection, verse 4, stanza 4 of Narottam's famous collection, Prarthana, Narottam longs for Lokanath, his Diksha Guru, to bring him to their ultimate shelter in the disciplic succession, Srila Rupa Goswami. Interesting, huh? He's begging his Diksha Guru, Lokanath, to bring him to Rupa Goswami. Here's how it sounds in the Bengali. Are there any Bengalis in the house?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to forgive me, I might mangle this, but I want to just quote the two lines. Prabhu Lokanatha Kage Sangilanya Jabe. You know what I'm saying? Good. Shri Rupera Palapadme More Samarpibe. Quote, when will my Lord and Master, Lokanath Goswami, my Prabhu Lokanath, take me with him and place me at the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami?
Interesting.
Interesting, huh? I got this from the late great Bhakti True Maharaj. He said, I got something for you, sir. seed for this lesson for you. It's a gem. So, as the, quote, chief of the six Goswamis, Srila Rupa Goswami was Narottama Lokanath's Bhakti Rasacharya. He was the founder of Acharya, the first, he was the chief. As soon as that Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was published, Sri Rupa was not the eldest Goswami. He wasn't famous for being the most renounced or the most prolific writer. But as soon as that Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was published, it's like everybody read it and they were in awe. They said, oh, you're the chief, you're the most expert at relishing the mellows of devotional service. So he was declared the Goswami, said, you're the chief. So he became the Bhakti Rasacharya, the chief amongst the Goswamis, the master most expert at relishing the moods of pure devotional service to Lord Krishna. And as Narottam's Diksha Guru, Sri Lokanath, had the pleasure and privilege of bringing his disciple closer to the foundational leader of the six Goswamis, Sabha. So you might wonder, well, what did Lokanath think of that? Did he think that his disciple was jumping over him to the founder Acharya? Jumping over, right? That's another thing we look at later in the seminar series. No, he knew it as the Diksha Guru, as the initiating Guru of Narottam, that it was his duty and privilege to bring him closer to the Bhakti Rasacharya. Quote, Rasacharya may sound close to, quote, founder Acharya, but by Lord Chaitanya's inscrutable will, the organizational, philosophical, and cultural seeds sown early for, quote, founder Acharya, which didn't appear till the 20th century, English Sanskrit compound, would have to wait another 3 centuries within a crucible, a pressure cooker, if you will, of disgrace before finishing seeds arrived to conclusively establish the founder Acharya principle. So within 15 years, say from 1545 to 1560, we got 3 seeds appearing of the founder Acharya phrase. But then by Lord Chaitanya's inscrutable will, mysterious will, we have to wait another 3 centuries for the final seeds to arrive to put the finishing touch on this founder Acharya principle, the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Why? Because yeah. We had to wait for Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur to appear, because by Mahaprabhu's will, within 100 years, say, after his disappearance, the whole Gaudiya, the whole Gaudiya Sampradaya fell into disgrace. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, there was 13 impostor sampradayas, upasampradayas, counterfeit versions of that just turned the whole thing into a disgraceful enterprise. When I was in college in the 60s, 1960s, I remember taking a course on the philosophy of Eastern religions. And we studied Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, and within Hinduism we spent 1 week on Bhakti. And you know how Bhakti was presented? As a corrupt, a real, just like an orgy of people letting their senses go wild. And so that's what people thought Bhakti was. It was some sentimental, thing where people, and that's thanks mainly to the Sahajas. That was one of the Upasampradayas, who mistook their material emotions, their desires for sense gratification, for spiritual emotions. And so everybody was imitating Radha Krishna's rasa dance, and it was just a mess. So, so I thought that was pretty weird, as a college kid in the 60s. Yeah. So it Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to come along. In the late 19th century, the great Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, identified and exposed more than a dozen counterfeit Gaudiya Vaishnava groups, who, beginning just a century after Lord Chaitanya's departure, had effectively disgraced Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Not only did Srila Bhaktivinoda restore Mahaprabhu's original teachings, as well as the glories of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, he also conceived of a mission to propagate Krishna consciousness globally, thus helping to fulfill a 16th century scriptural prophecy. Quote, you have to tell me the reference now, or this the book. You don't have to give me chapter verse, but tell me where this appears. Quote, in every town and village, the chanting of my name will be heard. Where's that from? Anybody know?
Chaitanya Bhagavat?
Chaitanya Bhagavat, right. Tiviti Acharya Nagar Arigram Sarvatra Prachara Haipe Varanam. That wasn't happening, although Mahaprabhu said it in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Vrindavan Das Thakur. It wasn't happening. So when Srila Bhaktivinoda revived the original teaching, he thought, okay, we've got to start making this happen. So he conceived of a global mission. Prabhupada said that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's the pioneer of the Krishna consciousness movement in the modern world. When reports reached Srila Bhaktivinoda of a rising Western interest in Indian culture, and Sanskrit in particular, the Thakur sent a copy of his Sanskrit work, Sri Krishna Samhita, to the American transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson. Are you familiar with Emerson? If you studied in America a little bit, then you... Yeah, so Emerson and Thoreau, they were the American, famous American transcendentalists, because they were reading the Gita. Of course, they were reading a British translation that wasn't as it is. But still, enough of the potency of the Gita came through that, like, is there a Gita?
Yeah, back over there.
Just read the...
At the back cover.
Yeah, just turn it around the back. And you read there. You see it?
Bhagavad Gita.
In the back.
Gita.
Gita. There you go.
Piche. Shama, you can read it.
Ah,
Back cover.
sure.
I owed a magnificent day to the Bhagavad Gita. It was the first of books. It was an empire spoke to us. Nothing smaller or unworthy, but large, serene, consistent. The voice of an old intelligence in which another age and climate had pondered and thus disclosed of the same questions which exercise us.
And then first below that you get Thoreau.
Throw them up. In the morning, I bathed my intellect in the stupendous and
Cosmogonal.
philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in comparison in which our modern world and its literature seem truly integral.
Yeah. So even they weren't getting it as it is, but still it was just, wow, this is awesome. It was making sense of everything, which Western religion and philosophy don't. It's very limited. So when the Thakur heard that Westerners were interested in Vedic culture and Sanskrit, what did he do? He mailed a copy. Bhaktivinoda mailed a copy to Emerson at Cambridge University, at Harvard, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. His Sanskrit work, Sri Krishna Samhita. When Emerson then Emerson got the book, and then Emerson gratefully replied by requesting books in English. So Emerson didn't know Sanskrit, but he read the Gita in an English translation. So he said, "Oh, thank you so much." He was getting a book, from and Bhaktivinoda knew how to write a letter, a cover letter, along with the book. So Emerson replied, "Do you have anything in English? I don't read Sanskrit. I don't read Devanagari or even the transliteration in Roman." So that, when Emerson gratefully replied by requesting books in English, Srila Bhaktivinoda penned, the top row?
Life and precepts of Lord Chaitanya.
Right. Sri Chaitanya, his life and precepts. And sent copies to several Western intellectuals and universities. I thought it was only one copy he sent to McGill University. But actually he sent copies to, don't chant japa during the seminar, you can't do both well. Well, I'm sorry, multitasking is a myth, especially when it comes to japa and, yeah. If you're behind like me, then I feel for you, because I'm a slow chanter too. Do it later. So, yeah, he sent copies to Oxford in England. He sent a copy to McGill in Montreal. He sent a copy to the University of Canberra. When I was presenting my seminars down in Canberra, Australia, the president, Adi Purush Prabhu, my godbrother, he said, "Would you like to see where Bhaktivinoda sent his book?" I said, "Yeah." So he took me to the university. He said, "There it is." University of Canberra. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
1896, right?
1896. And that's coming up too. And sent copies to several Western intellectuals and universities. But it was a Bengali work by the Thakur, published in 1900 as Harinama Chintamani, the touchstone of the holy name, that contained the crowning literary seeds for the founder Acharya principle. Okay, let's take a look. Oop, I don't do that yet. Okay, that's coming up. Oh. I gotta get one of my slides there. So there's the Thakur. I think this looks like he's in his chief magistrate group there. In chapter 6 of Harinama Chintamani, we have two translations now in ISKCON too. One by Bhanu Maharaj and one by Sarvabhavana Prabhu. Yeah. In chapter 6, Srila Bhaktivinoda describes three kinds of super gurus, that's my word, if you like, in a disciplic tradition. The first is the Sampradaya Adi Guru. So this is like Brahma, Lakshmi, Rudra, the Kumaras, the prehistoric, the primeval preceptors of these lines. The primeval guru of the tradition, directly enlightened by the Lord himself. Following the primeval guru are the Shiksha Guru Pratishtita, greatly revered preceptors who keep the tradition's teachings intact over long spans of time. So, you know, the Purva Acharyas, the previous Acharyas, who keep things intact over eons. But when the Thakur identified the third guru, he described him in the superlative. So this is the translation of this part. Quote, however, the Adyacharya, or original guru of a disciplic line, is appropriately worshipped and respected as the Guru Shiramanihi, the topmost crown jewel of the spiritual masters. His perfect philosophical conclusions are to be followed by all in his succession. Any contrary instructions will not be accepted. Unquote. So, just like, you know, we have our founder Acharya. We have so many teachers and teachings, so many previous Acharyas, Vishwanath, Baladev, and all these, and Prabhupada refers to them in his purports. But the last word for us is the way Prabhupada presents anything. Yeah. So that's a mark of somebody who's actually following Prabhupada. We accept Prabhupada's perspective on everything. And that's not a sectarian thing to do that. We'll discuss that in a little bit. Okay. So after the Thakur wrote that in 1900, the stage was set for the founder Acharya's seeds to bear fruit. Now the Thakur, he wrote that in 1900. He disappeared in 1914. So he never actually lived to see the seeds, in the material sense, of bearing fruit as that founder Acharya person and that founder Acharya phrase. Although the Thakur was the pioneer of the Krishna consciousness movement in the modern world, he knew he didn't have enough time to live to manifest that global movement. So what did he do? Do you know what he did? He prayed for
Ray of Vishnu.
someone from your personal staff. He's prayed to Mahaprabhu. A ray of Vishnu. And all the signs, when Bimal Prasad appeared, immediately the umbilical cord was wrapped like a Brahma thread around him. And then Bhagavati Devi placed the child, during Rath Yatra at the feet of Jagannath, and the garland fell. And of course, those are signs. But then, Morrison at the age of 7, Saraswati Thakur, he knew the whole Gita and he could explain it. Wow, that's a child prodigy. The seeds bear fruit. In the 1880s, while envisioning a worldwide Krishna consciousness movement, Srila Bhaktivinoda revived the Sri Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha. He revived that and launched a Bengali spiritual. He just called it the Vaishnava Raj Sabha. For some reason, he didn't say Sri. And he launched a Bengali spiritual journal. You know what the name of his journal was in Bengali?
Sajjan Toshani.
Sajjana Toshini. Quote, for the satisfaction of the devotees, the Vaishnavas. 4 decades later, so that was in 1879, so 4 decades later, Srila Bhaktivinoda's illustrious son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, reimagined the Sabha as the Gaudiya mission and transformed his father's journal into it's in English,
Harmonist.
a harmonist. Yeah. An English language periodical with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's scholarly disciple, Professor Nishikant Sanyal, as his co-editor. So there is the first issue. You can see from the dates, number 1, June 27 to May 28. So it started as an annual. And you can see the harmonist, and it says, what does it say below that? Sri
Sajjana Toshani.
Yeah, it's an English language version of his father's journal. So it started as like an annual. Time to coincide with the launch of the mission's brand new Calcutta headquarters, the October 1930 harmonist, so a few years later, 1930, carried the first of a 3-part series by Professor Sanyal about the Gaudiya Bhakti. What happened was, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta started his mission, as you may know, in 1918. Prabhupada told us by sitting down and accepting sannyas from a picture of his Guru Maharaj. Not to be imitated. As they say, don't try that at home. Right? Don't do it. Don't imitate it. But if you're on the level of a ray of Vishnu, you can do that. So through a picture, he accepted sannyas, and then that effectively was the beginning of his mission. By the time Prabhupada, our Prabhupada, met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in 1922, there was actually a physical mission manifesting. Prabhupada met him at the flagship, if you will, the original mutt, 1 Alta Dunga Junction. And now ISKCON has that, and they turned it into a museum. I hear it's very nicely done. And so it was very simple, Alta Dunga Junction. You can go there today, and they have the rooftop where Prabhupada met Saraswati Thakur, was living in a little bhajan kutir. But by 1930, what happened was, the Gaudiya Math had a wealthy patron named Jagabandhu, and he he was a businessman, he was wealthy, so he took his wealth and he decided, we need palatial headquarters for the Gaudiya mission. And so he, at Bazaar Junction, he built this, big marble palace. So when that building manifested, like you're getting ready to have a grand opening, maybe as soon as next Ram Navami, maybe, we'll see. Right. When that big building manifested, see, that's what people in Kali Yuga, they're impressed by big buildings. Like Prabhupada said, for ourselves, we're happy to sit under a tree and chant Hare Krishna, but nobody would come. So it's like a way to get people to come. And Prabhu took me there today, and I was very happy to see all these places for, educational programs. Because that's what we really want to do. We want to attract people, but so they can hear and get purified. That's even more for the teachings and practice the teachings. So they got this big place, and so in the October 19, by then the Harmonist was coming out more regularly. So in the October 1930 issue of the Harmonist, Professor Sanyal and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took the opportunity to introduce the Gaudiya Math in a big way, because now that certain building sort of put them on the map, so to speak. And so they were revealing what the Gaudiya Math was. We revived in its pure form the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the six Goswamis. And they started a renaissance of Gaudiya Vaishnavism all over India. 64 months, thousands of disciples. So in the 1930 issue, there was this article called the Gaudiya Math. It was in this article that the founder Acharya phrase, seeded for centuries, finally fructified. So now I'm going to read it's going to sound a little complicated because it's actually written by Professor Sanyal, but he was following the style of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who could write very simply and clearly, but also he was out to impress the intellectuals of the West, because the intellectuals of the West think that for something to be really high, it's got to be complicated, right? Complicated syntax. So if you can follow it, if you can't follow it, I'll just sort of give you a little rephrase, simple. But here's how Professor Sanyal identified Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who was the founder of the Gaudiya Math. Quote, the Gaudiya Math is also identical with its founder Acharya. That's where the phrase first appeared. Founder Acharya. Founder, organizational. He started it, he organized it. Acharya, somebody who's the exemplar, who lives the teachings better than anyone. And then he continues, the associates, followers, and abode of his divine grace are limbs of himself. Just like Prabhupada would say, ISKCON is my body. Here are all the limbs of my body. Same idea. Are the limbs of himself. None of them claim to be anything but a fully subordinate limb of this single individual. Everybody is doing the will of the founder. This unconditional, causeless, spontaneous submission to the head is found to be not only compatible with, but absolutely necessary for the fullest freedom of initiative of the subordinate limbs. So in our context, to realize our full potential as devotees, we need to understand Srila Prabhupada fully, his life, his teachings, his mood, his mission, and then we can realize our full potential as Vaishnavas, as servants of this most confidential servant of Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada. Now, during the Gaudiya mission's finest hour, we're going to get a little more into this founder Acharya phrase because it just appeared there in that paragraph, but there's going to be more. And that was in 1930. During the Gaudiya mission's finest hour, the first Vaishnava preaching expedition to Europe in the 1930s, that was the finest hour of the Gaudiya Math, when for the first time Vaishnavism was taken out of India to Europe. The book Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's leading preachers took with them was, Siddhanta Saraswati wouldn't let them go until a book was produced, which he had Professor Sanyal write, and then he edited it. It was called Sri Krishna Chaitanya, written by Professor Sanyal and edited by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, so it was a collaboration. Sanyal wrote it, and then one summer, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta went to a hill station, these British retreats in the hills that are cooler in hot India in the summer, and he just edited the whole thing. The work was written with sufficient breadth, depth, and excellence to impress the intelligentsia of the West. In its front matter, the elaborate table of contents highlighted the intimate connection between the Adi Gurus, the primeval preceptors of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, and the Sampradayas' four founder Acharyas, the Adi Gurus' extraordinarily empowered representatives, who revitalized their disciplic successions within recorded history. So that's a mouthful, but I'm going to show you how that looks. There's how it looks. That's what I just said. See, if you look across, there's the four Adi Gurus. You know, oh, again? Oh. Okay. All right. Everybody hold your breath. Technology. Yes. Okay. So if you look across, there's Lord Shiva, the Kumaras, the goddess Lakshmi, Lord Brahma. These are the four, standard Vaishnava Sampradayas. And then below each Adi Guru, they're the revitalizers of those lines in the Kali Yuga. Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Ramanuja, Madhva. Okay. So here's what Sanyal said in his elaborate table of contents to make that connection between those Adi Gurus and their the founder acharyas who revitalized their lines in the Kali Yuga. Quote, the systems of Sri Vishnu Swami, Sri Nimbarka, Sri Ramanuja, and Sri Madhva are connected with the ancient times by their recognition of the remote authority of the eternal ancient teachers, namely Lakshmi, Brahma, Rudra, and the four Kumaras, respectively. The four founder acharyas of the Iron Age profess to preach the views of those original teachers of the religion. Yeah. So, okay. Now, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, the book that they brought, strictly applied founder, quote, founder Acharya, to the four Sampradayas revitalizers, otherwise known as Sampradaya Acharyas. So, yeah, because those extraordinary personalities, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Ramanuja, Madhva, they were so empowered that they could take their ancient Sampradayas and take those Sampradayas in a dynamic new direction to revitalize it for the Kali Yuga. They're called Sampradaya Acharyas. Now, since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had founded but a branch of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, itself but an extension of the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya, Bhaktisiddhanta knew many people would consider him presumptuous and proud if he, Bhaktisiddhanta, applied that Sampradaya title to himself. For the written record, however, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did allow Professor Sanyal to confidently refer to him, Bhaktisiddhanta, as the Gaudiya Mission's founder Acharya within the pages of the Harmonist. So he wouldn't introduce himself as the founder Acharya, but he allowed that for the record to be in there in writing in the Harmonist. Plus, there's another reason, and he didn't use that title. I'm going to end the lesson with that, and we're going to look at that later in another lesson. Okay, so slide 8. Oh, yeah. Okay, hold your breath. Slide 8. In lesson 4 of this series, which we won't get to this time, but I can come back next summer. In lesson 4 of this series, we'll see why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta could, with equal confidence later, leave this world and his founder Acharya title behind. He could foresee what would soon befall his own institution. Within a few years, that glorious Gaudiya mission would fragment because his followers disobeyed his instructions how to carry it on after he left. He could foresee what would soon befall his own institution. As well as the one disciple, he could also see the one disciple who would be ready, willing, and able to revive it as the founder Acharya of a fresh branch of Lord Chaitanya's mission, far, far away from Mother India. That's setting the stage for later lesson. Okay, so that's basically the evolution of the founder Acharya principle of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And let's see. Okay. Yeah, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. That's Srila Prabhupada at that same New Vrindavan festival. Remember the, yeah. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to have a Q&A. I don't know if you made a mental note or a physical note or an electronic note, but yes.
Just, Prabhuji, if you could give us a quick, maybe a couple of sentences on just a recap of the four seeds. Was it cultural, and so just so we can kind of.
That's actually I used to do that. Thank you. I said, okay, who remembers the 4 seeds? So who remembers the first seed? What was the first seed?
Founder
Of the first seed of the founder Acharya principle in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. What was the first? What did I call it? It was a
philosophical, or that's the second one?
No, it was before philosophical. An organizational seed.
Organization.
The 6 Goswamis organized a Sangha. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, because they could see. All right, Mahaprabhu has appeared, the golden avatar, the Yuga avatar for the age. We gotta, and he only wrote down 8 verses, right? The Shikshastik. So we've got to write down, we've got to elaborate on his whole amazing philosophy, Rupa Shiksha, Sanatana Shiksha. So they did. Such a vast, that's probably, you might recall Prabhupada saying on a recording, the elaboration of the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya is the most voluminous, exacting, and consistent of any religious culture in the world. That's a big claim. In other words, what we have to give the world by the grace of Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis and the previous Acharyas and Prabhupada distilling it in his books is the most information and experience anybody can have of God. That's a big claim. So, okay, so there was an organizational seed, and then
Philosophical.
And then there's a philosophical seed as described in what book?
Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu.
Right? There's a distinction made, a very important distinction between regular gurus and the great acharyas. Yeah. So they're all gurus, but one guru is with a small g and one's with a capital G. the Ramanujis, they even have a shastra about this. It's called Sri Prapanamrita Tapana, and they call Ramanuja their Uddharak. He's the deliverer, the main deliverer. And all the gurus who come after the Uddharak, they're called Upakarak. They're benefactor gurus. And how do they benefit their disciples? Well, they help their disciples understand Ramanuja's books. They help their disciples, they teach them how to worship his murti. And they teach them how to execute Ramanuja's Vishishta Dvaita mission. Does that sound familiar? Who are we worshipping every day in his murti form?
Srila
Srila
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Whose books are we studying every day, or we should be? Prabhupada's books. And whose ISKCON mission are we executing?
Srila Prabhupada.
It's the same thing. The founder Acharya provides a unity amidst all our diversity over time, so that the line goes on. It withstands the ravages of time. To this day, if you meet any self-respecting Ramanuji, and if he happens to speak English as well as Tamil, you say, "Oh, I see you have big Ramanuja tila. So, who are you, Prabhu?" What will he say to you? He'll say, "Adiyan, Ramanuja Dasan, I'm your servant, the servant of Ramanuja." Hey, Ramanuja lived 1,000 years ago. They just had his millennial celebration in 2017 in Sri Rangam. Yeah? Well, how have they continued? How have they avoided? I mean, there was a split in around the 13th century because there were two parties, but still, they've been pretty much intact, the Sampradaya, over 1,000 years. We're only 50 years old in this town, 50, 60 years old, and look what we're going through. Woo. So many differences of opinion about everything. Deity worship, gurus, gurukulas, you name it, Sankirtan. Everybody's got, and now through social media, everybody can put out their manifestos. We call them keyboard warriors, right? And rile up everybody. Yeah, everybody gets their own little click, right? So if we want to survive the ravages of time, we need to put our founder Acharya front and center. Yeah. So, where was I?
Philosophical.
Philosophical seed. And then we showed an example of the philosophy in action with a cultural seed through the pastime of Narottama Lokanath, right?
Culture.
Yeah. It's part of the culture, that it's the duty of gurus, Shiksha Diksha gurus, to bring their disciples closer to their, well then it was Bhakti Rasacharya, Rupa, but now to the founder Acharya. As we learned last night, in the first lesson, we're all supposed to grow up, and of course we're always students, but we're also supposed to become teachers and give shelter to others. We're supposed to become gurus in our own right and give shelter to others. So, I lost my train of thought there.
The cultural.
Culture, yeah, that's the culture. That's the way the role, the guru disciple culture, is to enrich and enhance and deepen our disciples, our students' relationship with the founder Acharya. We all have a foundational relationship with Srila Prabhupada, a core identity. Who are we? We're Prabhupada Nugas. We're followers of Srila Prabhupada. And so we all share that identity, right? That people look at me and they say, "Oh, you took initiation from Srila Prabhupada. You're a Prabhupada disciple." I don't usually play that card. It comes in handy when you're getting in line for prasadam. especially in Mayapur.
Yeah.
When the line is, like a mile long, and then you just walk up to the front of the line and you, I'm glad Shishya. Okay, or you're in the Charnamrit line, seven. Otherwise, I don't play that card. Because really, we all share the same identity. We're actually Prabhupada Nugas.
Yeah.
And that shared identity is what will allow this kind to continue for the centuries. It's supposed to, we're supposed to, for 10,000 years. We have an opportunity. This kind has an opportunity to be the vehicle to do that. So that shared identity will carry us through. Otherwise, we just sort of fragment into cliques. My God family and my guru and this. Prabhupada is the Acharya with a capital A. Okay,
And
so
the fourth.
organizational, philosophical, cultural, and then finally we had literary seeds that appeared in the Harmonist. The Acharya, the founder of a disciplic line. He's the Guru Shiromani. He's the topmost crown jewel of the gurus, and it's his conclusions we accept. I once visited a godbrother of mine who has, left ISKCON's Sangha, and he's following another Gaudiya guru, and he's friendly, he's a well-wisher, but I could see on his altar that Prabhupada was no longer his main guru. He had more faith in another Gaudiya guru. That's fine, you can do that, but you're just not in Prabhupada Sangha anymore. To be in Prabhupada Sangha means to accept Srila Prabhupada's words as the last word. And of course, that's also a challenge to understand those last words. So many interpretations of those last words. But yeah, we see everything through Prabhupada's lens. And this godbrother was now seeing Prabhupada through this other guru's lens. You do that if you want, but that's not being in Prabhupada's Sangha anymore. Yeah. Okay, so that's the recap. We had those 4 seeds, and then they finally fructified in the 1930 issue of the Harmonist.
Founder Acharya.
Yeah, and as I said, Bhaktisiddhanta, he didn't advertise that, although he allowed it to be said, because he was the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Math. But he could proceed. And in lesson 4 of the series, which will come up if I come again, we see very dramatically that Siddhanta Saraswati could see in the person of Acharya Arvinda Das, the one who would be capable of reviving that disintegration. Yeah. He will do everything himself. You don't have to recommend him. I'm giving a little preview. Yeah, he said that to Bhakti Saranga Maharaj, his sannyas disciple. Why is Avai Babu? Why is he living separately? He should be the president of the Bombay Math. He helped us fundraise and get the building, and everybody loves his preaching and his singing, and he should be the head. He should be the Mahant. Bhakti Siddhanta said, no, it is better he's living separate from your company. He's better he's aloof. He's apart. He will do everything himself. You don't have to recommend him. So, yeah, it's pretty dramatic. And Prabhupada wasn't there when he said that. And then Prabhupada was always thinking, what does that mean? He heard Guru Maharaj said, I will do everything. Because at that point, Srila Prabhupada was still trying to become rich. Another Virla, his horoscope said. And then, with his accumulated wealth, after the kids are grown, and his wife is being protected by the grown children, and then he can go off and, with his wealth, he will do the mission. Prabhupada said, no, I had my plans, Krishna had his. Krishna sent me to your country a pauper. Nothing. No money. No friends. no institutional support, no nothing. That's even more glorious than to create a worldwide preaching movement out of nothing, except he had everything he had. This Guru Maharaj's order and Krishna prema in his heart, and that's really all he needed. Therefore, founder Acharya. Okay, so that was a good question to start to recap. Is there anything else? It's better if the questions do reflect the points of this lesson. So, does your question reflect the points of this lesson?
I'm trying to reflect upon Mahaprabhu said, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nashi Sudra Kene Noy Jai Guru Tat Krishna Tattvavedta Sai Guru Hai.
Well, before Prabhu says any more, can we get the YouTubers? Can we get the mic?
Oh yeah, microphone. It's
Yeah.
up there. It's up there, bro.
Just attach it and then we'll
It's
run it.
connected to the wire. Be good to go.
And then we have to have a young, how about Roman? Is that your name, Roman? Yeah. You look like a real spry, strong young man. Would you be willing to run the mic to the different people? Unless they just pass it around. But you can be the runner. You look like a very fit young man. I used to be a runner in my time too, but I can't run anymore. Okay, Prabhu. Again, from the top, your question.
One question is about
Hold it like this, bro.
Mahaprabhu said, Kiva Vipra Kiba Nashi Sudra Kene Noy
Uh-huh.
Jai Guru Tattvavedta Sai Guru Hai.
Yeah.
Jai Krishna Tattvavedta Sai
Right.
Guru Hai. That means be he a sannyasi, be he a Vipra, be he a Sudra. If he knows Krishna Tattva, he is a Guru. So, in terms of the founder Acharya and the initiating Acharya, the Guru and the Shiksha Guru, so do I see it as they're all Krishna Tattvavedyas, but they see a bigger, little smaller, still smaller aspect of Krishna. That way can it be seen or?
Yeah, I mentioned last night, I don't know if I said it enough, but gurus have different capacities. That's one way they differ. So a founder Acharya, my Lord, he's like a Jagat Guru. He can, take the whole world back to Godhead. But at least as regular gurus, we're expected to grow up and be teachers in our own right. It doesn't mean you have to be like I have godbrothers who they're not readers, but they're always hearing Prabhupada. As I know godbrothers like Shudra Keninoy, they're working and they're workers, but they're always hearing Prabhupada. So they have so much to share because they're always hearing Prabhupada's classes and his morning walks and his room conversations and his addresses and arrivals, talks and all this stuff. So the context, of that verse was, Ramananda Roy. He was technically a Shudra. He was a Kayastha, which is he was a clerk. He was governor of Madras, but anyway, so Mahaprabhu was, and Ramananda Roy was doubting that he could tell anything to Mahaprabhu, that he could. Lord Chaitanya wanted to hear from Ramananda Roy, because he heard there's this amazing devotee, Ramananda Roy. You've got to meet him. Who said that to him? Sarvabhauma? Yeah. So he went to Madras and he met Ramananda Roy. And Ramananda Roy was doubting, but no. Mahaprabhu said, no, look, Kiva Vipra, whether you're learned, Kiva Nyasi, whether you're very renounced, Shudra Keninoy, you're in the employ of the government here, so that's a Shudra position. The modern word for Shudra is employee. That's how we are in Kali Yuga. We're on the employ of others. And that's okay, but if you're Krishna conscious, Shudra Keninoy, Ye Krishna Tattva Veta, if you know the truth, in truth. It's like Janma Karma Janeti Evam Yoveti Tattvataha. not just superficially, but deeply, you know Krishna in truth. Say Guru Hoy. Yeah, you can be a guru. So you can teach me, Ramananda. You can be my teacher. And of course, Mahaprabhu was just he enlightening him from within. And Ramananda knew that. He even said that. Yeah. So this even came up in. Do you want to say anything more before I have another corollary in that? But do you want to ask?
My second question is a little bit off track.
Oh, it's off track.
About
Oh yeah, you were just quoting that. So what's your question?
Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was a Manjari. So he has full spiritual potency. So why did he? Why did the Gaudiya Math flounder with all tussles for following departure?
Why with the ray of Vishnu as its head did the Gaudiya Math break up?
Why did he let it happen? Was it his pastime? Was it for Prabhupada to shine? We do not know, of course, but could such a...
Yeah. So, in the next lesson we get into this a little bit more. I can give you maybe a little preview. You can say the same thing about Srila Prabhupada. Why, if Prabhupada is Nityasiddha, Shaktivesh Avatar, and all this, did he appear and appear to, he went through a lot of trials and tribulations, right? To support he was married for 36 years, and it was hard, because he didn't even like his wife. He didn't like, can you imagine that? Prabhupada told his father, Gaur Mohan, actually, Father, I don't like this lady you picked out. Because as you people know, when you get married in India, it's families marrying. Everybody's got to be on the same page, right? It's not just two people. It's like two whole clans are getting together. So Prabhupada said, I don't like this. I have another, someone else in mind. And so we found out more about this someone else. Has anybody ever read this book by my godbrother, Chudananda, formerly Swami Chudananda Prabhu? You know what Chudananda? You heard of him? He lives down in Lachua. He used to be a sannyasi in the 70s. He was an amazing person, just learning Bengali, learning all the bhajans. In the 70s, in these cassette tapes, we had this songs of the Vaishnava Acharyas. You might have heard him singing them, and we have song books based on. So anyway, he was along with Prabhupada in '67, because when Prabhupada went back to India to get his health back in '67 after he had his stroke/heart attack, he was alone with Prabhupada from August till December. Yeah, and Prabhupada shared many things that only Achyutananda heard about India and Prabhupada's, growing up. And so he said, my father, and Prabhupada of course told everything, he told us all this, that said to me, well, it's very good you don't like your wife, because later on it will be very easy for you to detach. Don't tell that to the press. That's not something you share with the Western press. This is a cult. So then Prabhupada said, I had my eye on another young lady. So Gaur Mohan, and Prabhupada didn't tell us this, but he told Achyutananda this. He said, I had my eye on another Bengali girl who was beautiful. A beautiful Bengali girl with beautiful dark eyes and dark hair. And so Gaur Mohan said, oh, who is this? Show me who you like better than the one I picked. So Prabhupada said, okay. So Prabhupada was thinking maybe Papa will go for it, because it's allowed to marry more than one lady. If you can take care of them. So they go to the house, but Gaur Mohan had something else in mind. He had in mind to not ever allow this. So they went to the house, and so Gaur Mohan said, "You have a daughter, Prabhu," he was talking to the father of the girl, "who my son very much likes. So, and then, so could I meet this girl?" So the father brought the girl out, and then, and the Guru Mohan saw, "Oh, this girl is stunning. This lady is like a Rani, like a queen or something. This would be very hard, right, for Amai to lead this person." So then Guru Mohan said to the father, "Tell me, does your girl dance?" Now, back in turn of the century India, "does your girl dance" was the cultural equivalent of saying, "is your girl a prostitute?" Because in those days, the girls that were protected by the family, nobody even saw them. They were like sheltered in the house, and they were taught by their parents, the home arts of cooking and sewing and taking care of children, and they didn't get up on a stage, and I don't think did Bharat. I'm not sure if no, I don't think he meant that. He meant, does she dance? Does she go out and dance? No, she doesn't. She is she's being brought up properly by us. Of course not. And he was insulted. That finished the whole thing. No question of the marriage, because the father of the girl has been insulted. So, finish. Boss.
Yes.
So Prabhupada told that to Chudananda. So he probably didn't tell us that detail, but he told it to us. How does that relate to what we were talking about? I don't know, I got off somewhere.
Chanakya Pandit said,
Oh, cultural. Yeah.
Rupavati Bhadya Shatru. Chanakya Pandit said, Rupavati Bhadya Shatru.
Oh, if the wife is beautiful, she's an enemy? Yeah.
And I have a third question, Prabhu, if others are done, I can.
No, that doesn't apply to Vaishnavis, because if
No.
you're beautiful, you can attract others to Krishna by your achar, by your behavior. Somebody might look at you and go, "Oh," but then they hear from you. Ah, this is not just the Rani, this is the sadhu. So use your beauty
Others have
to
questions.
attract people to Krishna. I'm sorry, go
If
ahead.
others have questions, I'm just saying.
Okay, I have one question about your personal experience, like in New Vrindavan, or like olden days when there was no electricity. No
Okay,
water.
Tomorrow night.
at 5 p.m.
Details.
After the third lesson. We're going to do the third lesson. It's called Our Srila Prabhupada. That's from 2:30 to 4. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then at 5, I'm going to give a Sunday feast talk. The times I met Srila Prabhupada, I saw him 8 times. And every time was like amazing. So, I won't spoil it. You got to come. If you can. Okay, Vaishnavis, we know you owe us some questions. I know the last night. No,
Ask.
well, Monica, you had some questions.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Are you right? Hare Krishna. This is question about.
Is it on?
Yeah, just keep it closer to your mouth like this.
One second.
Okay.
Prabhu pull up like that.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Right.
So I have question regarding, yesterday I wanted to ask you about the initiation. You said that Prabhupada did lot of initiation. So as a new
He did
devotee,
what?
initiation, as a initiated a lot of disciples.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she got.
It's, okay, yeah, we should try to go till 8, so
Yeah.
this is good.
so just I want, as a new devotee, if I wanted to take a initiation, how do you feel when you took the initiation with Sri Prabhupada? Did you feel connections with your guru? What kind of connections you felt with him? That's only I had questions.
For me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, of course, in Prabhupada's time with us, he was the only guru of ISKCON.
Okay.
He was the founder of Acharya, he was the initiator, he was the instructor, he was the grandfather, all rolled into one. But I have another story that I think is going to speak more to what I think you're getting at. Because today we have a multiple guru culture, right? Prabhupada's the founder of Acharya, and there are people initiating after him. Like the Ramanuji say, the Upakarak, the benefactor gurus. How do they benefit their disciples? Well, in ISKCON, if our gurus, Shiksha and Diksha, if they enrich, enhance, and deepen everyone's relationship with Prabhupada, that's a mark of a real bona fide guru in ISKCON. Yeah. So, I'd like to tell you a story in that connection. And I don't mind if it takes up the whole time, because it's a real powerful story, about someone I know, and she prefers to remain anonymous, so I won't say her name. She doesn't want to be approached, because this is going to be on YouTube, so she doesn't want everybody coming up to her, oh, you're the person of the story, and she's a very, modest person, so she doesn't want to be famous. So, when I was doing the basic research for this Acharya series, I knew her story. Her story was that she read Prabhupada's Gita in 1987. And she's from India, and she read it in India, as it is, in English. And so she was thrilled. She was a teacher. She still is. She was a teacher, and she was bright. And when she read Prabhupada's Gita, she thought, "Wow, this is the absolute truth. The Chinta Veda Veda Tattva and Prabhupada's presentation. This is the real Gita. This is as it is." So she wanted to meet Prabhupada. So she went to the Calcutta temple. She was living in Calcutta at the time. And she was crestfallen to find out that Prabhupada had left this world 10 years earlier, in 77. But she really still felt a connection with Srila Prabhupada by reading his Gita. And Calcutta temple was the first temple she went to. She wanted to get involved in Prabhupada's mission and help others come to Prabhupada, come to Prabhupada's Gita. So that's 87. So then, a couple of years later, one of my godbrothers was in India, and he was a brahmachari, and he went to Calcutta temple visiting, and he was thinking about marriage, and this lady was there, and the lady caught his eye. So there was a relationship that began, and he was initiated by Srila Prabhupada, so he was senior. And so, anyway, she ended up marrying this godbrother of mine, and then they moved to America. And now he's OCI. Right? He's married an Indian lady. So, and they live in America. They live in America. I won't say where, because you might give it away, too much. So she's reading Prabhupada's Gita, and she also started reading all these other books, Nectar Devotion and CC and everything. She's an educator, so she is very capable of understanding Prabhupada's books and then teaching from the books too. So she knows from Prabhupada's books, especially if you read Nectar Devotion and CC, that you're supposed to take this, if you want to really blossom, realize your full potential in Krishna consciousness, going from Shraddha to Prem, you've got to take initiation. You've got to go from Ado Shraddha, a little faith, to Tat Sadhu, you got to associate with devotees. And then Bhajana Kriya is that stage where you actually become committed to the path, where you're ready to follow principles and the disciplines of bhakti and chant rounds. So it says right in the, might have been in my script, you got to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and you got to take initiation. Was that in tonight's lesson?
Not yesterday's,
okay,
Prabhupada.
last night, yeah, that's right. So she's reading in Prabhupada's books that you've got to take initiation. But she joined ISKCON at a time, the late 80s and early 90s, when there's so much
Turbulence.
turmoil in ISKCON. And so she's getting a little gun shy. She's wondering that if I take initiation, maybe I'll get disappointed, maybe my guru will fall down, maybe, I don't know if I want to do this. And I can't imagine, offering incense to anybody else's picture or flowers, or I know Prabhupada's my spiritual master, but he's not her initiating spiritual master. He's her founder Acharya. But the founder Acharya is telling her in the books that she's got to take initiation. So, it's becoming a real conflict, right? As the 90s go on, ISKCON is still, there's still a lot of traumas and dramas and going on. And then the 90s go on, and then the end of the millennium is approaching. Remember Y2K? Did we remember that? Where the whole world is going to go up in a puff of cyber smoke because of the calendar and all.
Yeah.
Anyway, Y2K came and went, and the world didn't end. So, so she said, Mataji said to her, Prabhuji, Prabhu, this is driving me crazy. Now she's, Y2K means now it was 13 years since she first read Prabhupada's Gita, and Prabhupada's telling her she's got to take initiation. And she'll be darned if anybody's going to come in between her and Prabhupada. She doesn't want to risk it, that she's going to be disappointed. So, it's 2003 now, and she and her husband are at a festival, and a certain leader, Swami, starts speaking, and she feels inspiration. He's a very nice person. So she said to her husband, Prabhu, my dilemma, my dilemma, I'm driving you crazy too by my dilemma. I'm becoming so neurotic about this initiation stuff. So, but I think this sannyasi can help me. So can you ask the festival organizer if we can have a darshan for a little bit, just a little bit, So they go to the festival organizer and the person says, well, Maharaj has been traveling and he's exhausted and he's not feeling well, but okay, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10 minutes with Maharaj. 10 minutes, right? To solve this lady's life problems. My God. Anyway, by Krishna's grace, 10 minutes turned into 20 minutes, turned into 30 minutes. So out of over a 40-minute darshan, this lady pours out, her heart and her dilemma to the Maharaj, and says also, I don't want anybody disturbing my relationship with Prabhupada. But Prabhupada's telling me to take initiation. And I'll be darned if I'm going to let anybody come in between me and Prabhupada and mess things up, What if, what if I get betrayed, disappointed? So the Maharaj patiently hears her out. And then she says, is my attitude offensive? Is this offensive for me to think like this? And Maharaj is very wise. He says, it's not offensive, it's intelligent. Actually, you proceeded to tell her what he went through before he surrendered to Prabhupada. And then he said something really wise. He said, what if you took initiation from someone who wouldn't get in the way of you and Prabhupada, who would bring you closer to Prabhupada, who would enrich, enhance, and deepen your relationship with Srila Prabhupada? Would that work? And the poor lady said, oh, I never heard that before. No wonder because still it was like, and still in ISKCON today, it was all about the initiator. And you had to just give your heart to the initiator, and somehow he was the new Prabhupada or something, you know, it was crazy. What if would that work, you know, if he would bring you closer to Prabhupada? Oh, I never heard that before. Wow. That wasn't the party line. That wasn't preached. So she said, yeah, that would really be wonderful. Oh, Maharaj, could I start a correspondence with you? So she started writing this Maharaj. And that was in 2003. 2004, she took Diksha from this Maharaj. Now she had shared with me, because I knew her from before. I sort of knew her story. And so in 2011, when I was doing the basic research for the Founder Acharya seminars, I knew her story, but I wanted to make sure I was getting it right, because I knew her story was going to be good, a good story to drive home a point. So I said, Mataji, could you write down your story? I just want to make sure I get it right. Just write it all down in an email. And so she did, and it was just the way I remembered it. And then the best part is what she said at the end, after the story was over. And that was, it's 2011 now, so it's 7 years after she's taken initiation. So she said, and Suresvara Prabhu, I'm glad to tell you, I'm so happy to tell you, that not only has Maharaj kept his promise to bring me closer to Prabhupada, that because if he is who he is, and how he's done that for me, bring me closer to Prabhupada, now he has also taken his place at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada in my heart. So I said, yes, that's the way the parampara is supposed to work. All the gurus who come after the Founder Acharya, they sit at the feet of the Founder Acharya, and we love them because they bring us closer to the Founder Acharya. Congratulations. So she waited 17 years, from 1987 to 2004, before she took Diksha. And her case is unique. It's not that we necessarily have to wait all that time. But before we do take that leap, we should be sure that this is, because there was a mutual examination process during that 2003 to 2004 for about a year. You know, she was developing a relationship with Maharaj. So it took that mutual examination process to make sure that this was going to work. That, you know, he had the right, he was going to be a good fit. I call it spiritual chemistry, right? That she was going to surrender to him as Prabhupada's representative of the whole Prabhupada of the Parampara. And that he could be sure about her, that she was a bona fide candidate, that she wasn't going to just flake off and just become a Ritvik. Oh, Prabhupada's my only guru. Sorry, Maharaj, you know, you don't cut it. You're not Prabhupada. No, she understood that the job of the Shiksha and Diksha gurus is to bring us closer to the Acharya. Yeah. So it's a beautiful story. And here's a funny thing. When I was telling the story once at Soho Street in London at the temple, where Radha London Ishwara are, They used to be in Berry Place, and then they moved to Soho. So I was telling that story, and Mataji happened to be watched. She just happened to catch it. It was live streamed or something, you know, and she saw me telling the story. and she emailed me, "Thank you for keeping me anonymous, and also thank you for telling it as it was." That's exactly the way it happened. Thank you very much. And for telling the PS too. Yes, thank you for telling the PS, because that really is the mark of a guru. Taking his place in the heart of the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. It doesn't replace Prabhupada, but at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. So we shouldn't avoid initiation, nor should we just rush into it. You know, one is just as bad as the other. You rush into initiation just naive, you don't know anything, and you don't know what. It's a relationship. It's not just some box you check off. Okay, I got my guru. You know, like, don't make the guru a pet, Prabhupada said. I got my guru. Right? And then don't avoid it. Don't just be an eternal, reluctant or doubting Thomas, as they say in Christianity. Don't be an eternal viewing it from the sidelines. You can't really, to really progress, to really deepen your Krishna consciousness, you need that personal connection. Thank you for, was that good?
Yes, thank you so much.
That's my favorite story that I tell of all the stories I tell in these seminars. Okay, any other Maharajas have a question? Shama must have a question. You have all the answers then. No questions?
Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Comments, questions? It is 8 p.m., but we can go a little more if somebody stops me with a... Oh, okay.
It's interesting how...
Well, wait a minute.
Wait, one
Save
second,
it.
one second.
Save it for the YouTubers.
Hare Krishna. It's interesting how Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur knew not to bother Prabhupada at this time.
Not to what?
Not to bother Prabhupada going to the temple.
That his godbrother should canvass for him to be the president.
And also, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was an astrologer also.
Yeah.
So maybe,
He was Trikalagir. He knew past, present, and future. He could see what was coming. And you'll see in lesson 4 how, he was lamenting. Prabhupada told us, I only met my Guru Maharaj 5 or 6 times. Physically, Bapu. But he was always there studying his teachings. And Prabhupada said, but those times were very intimate. Guru Maharaj would insist that I sit right next to him. He could see who this Acharya what his potential was. And the godbrothers would criticize me. Oh, who does he think he is, sitting on the same seat with Guru Maharaj? Fools rush in, they say, right, where angels fear to tread. And the Prabhupada told us, well, fool I may have been, but what could I do? Guru Maharaj was insisting, I sit right next to him. And he would speak so many things, confide in me, so many things. And you'll see in this lesson 4 that there's 3 big blessings that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta gave Prabhupada. And the last blessing is the heaviest. It was a prediction of what would happen to the William Mutt. I wish that I could sell the marble off that temple in Bag Bazaar and just print books. Ever since we got this opulent temple, my leading preachers are becoming attached to opulence. They're forgetting, they're losing their preaching spirit. They're just fighting over who's going to have the nicest rooms in this temple. Oh, if you ever get money, print books. That was the seed of our, in ISKCON, our book distribution, production and distribution. That was right there at Radhakund in November 35. By Acharya India, if you ever get money, print books. But we'll do it more dramatically, next time. There's a whole sequence of events. Yeah, now you can see And you might have heard stories, there's other examples of Guru Maharaj singling Bhai Acharya out. Did you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to have the grand finale of this part. This is the Sambandha section of the seminar, where we deepen our relationship with Prabhupada. So lesson 1 was the spiritual masters. Tonight's was a special kind of Guru, a founder, Acharya. And tomorrow night, the lesson's called Our Srila Prabhupada. And you're going to see in that lesson how Krishna, when Prabhupada came to the West, how Lord Chaitanya revealed to Prabhupada what he wanted Prabhupada to do. When Prabhupada was on that ship, the furthest thing from his mind was starting a new branch of... No, he was just trying to revive the Gaudiya mission. He wasn't trying to start anything new, he was just trying to revive it. So, Lord Chaitanya revealed to him in that first year, especially from September 65 when he got off that ship, until he incorporated his in July. So say 10 months. 9-10 months. Lord Chaitanya revealed to Prabhupada what Prabhupada had to do, what he wanted him to do. And then, once Prabhupada understood that, once that became clear to Prabhupada, how Prabhupada over a 5-year period, from 66 to 70, when I joined, how Prabhupada revealed all of that to us. It's fascinating. He did it very gradually. It wasn't like all at once. So gradually Prabhupada understood from events that were happening in New York City, from 65 to 66. And then Prabhupada, very intelligently, following his Guru Maharaj and Srila Rupa Goswami and Mahaprabhu, how his strategy in revealing his position to us as founder Acharya. It didn't happen all at once. It happened over gradually. So please come 2:30. It's early. You have to come earlier. And then, the dessert will be. I'll just share with you, my 7 or 8 times that I saw Prabhupada in Vapu. So, thank you. Is anybody any more questions or comments before we retire for the night? Okay, well, thanks so much for coming.
There you go. Jai. Suresvara Prabhu ki. Jai. Ki Jai.